Well, let's see. There we go. Welcome to Topics in American Literature, Fall 2021 semester with Mr. Smith. This is day 4. Blues and Gospel and the African American Literary Experience. The quote is from Toni Morrison. It is from her novel, Beloved. In the beginning was the sound. In the beginning was the sound. Some of you know that that's a riff and a paraphrase on the prologue to John's Gospel, the 4th Gospel in the New Testament. Some ancient literature, some global literature, not American literature, where it says in the beginning was the Word. And she's talking about the sound of African American community experience, because out of the pain and the suffering of the experience of Black bodies being brought in chains in the time when slavery was taking place, out of that experience, 2 great American musical art forms, blues and the gospel, come out of that suffering as sounds of freedom and sounds of liberation. And these begin in the fields of the slave church, in the woods, in the experience where African American communities were worshiping together. And these 2 musical forms, blues and gospel, got married, and out of that, music today known as rock and roll, and the music today known as country music or folk music or bluegrass music, all of those musical forms were born out of this gift, and out of the pain, and out of even what some scholars call the sin of slavery. From that, we were able to birth the beauty of blues and gospel music. This is an indigenous American art form that comes out of something terrible and makes something beautiful and amazing. Blues and gospel, I teach them as being united, but not all scholars of blues and gospel music see them as companions, as collaborators, but rather as opposites, because they traverse that very difficult chasm, that very deep chasm between Saturday night and Sunday morning. If you stay out really late on Saturday night, I'll tell you, it will bleed very quickly in to Sunday morning. Where I come from, up in Michigan and Detroit, we would have after hours clubs. Most of the mainstream bars and clubs would close down at around 2 a.m. And at around 2 a.m., the after hour joint would open up, sometimes called the Blind Pig, and that would be open until dawn. You're not going to make it to church on Sunday morning if you are partying very late on Sunday night. So that's a phone ringing in the background, and I don't want to hang up on them. I'm just going to let that go. So that's just some environmental audio there. There was a car when I got here this morning. There was a car alarm going on off in the gold lot. They keep raising the price of the gold sticker, which is okay with me, because then I can actually get a parking place. But today I rode my bicycle to campus from all the way across Cookeville. I'm feeling very, very proud of myself for that this morning. And so today's talk, I take the line from a sermon by my friend and pastor friend from Trinity United Church of Christ in the south side of Chicago, the Reverend Otis Moss III, about the difference between the gospel shout and the blues moan, or the similarity between the gospel shout and the blues moan, blues, gospel, hip hop, and the African American literary experience. We're not going to get too much into hip hop this morning, but spoken word poetry and the Black church sermon are related to hip hop, and hip hop is related to rock, is related to gospel, is related to the blues. And so there's a lineage, there's a thread that goes back to the 19th century when these art forms were really born. And next week, I'll talk a little bit more about the birth of recorded music as an art form, and in particular, how these particular song hunters went and found these sounds and brought them to bear on our current experience. But welcome to this kind of condensed version. And there's so many versions of this I've done. I've probably got multiple versions up on my YouTube. So I don't even know that today is going to be even the best version of it. I hope it's a pretty good version of it. So Pastor Moss says they could not distinguish between the gospel shout and the blues moan. Joy is married to sorrow, tragedy forever engaged to triumph. Praise and pain, our first cousins, worship and weeping are constantly flirting with each other. And so I'm going to be leaning on several thinkers here, a lot of them Black American thinkers, African American thinkers, and they're going to be some white scholars, some female scholars, some male scholars, but they're going to be on this cusp and on this tension as whether or not the blues and gospel are in harmony and in collaborating in the narrative of Black liberation, or maybe that there is some opposition here, and there's some tension, some dynamic tension. Is this an either or a both and situation? And so you all, after you've listened to the playlist I've made for you guys and started to ponder this topic, as you're starting to dream up your own playlists for much later in the semester, be thinking about whether or not you come away from this, if you see the blues and gospel as in harmony, or if whether you see them as opposites. I'm going to read you a poem by my man John Sinclair. John Sinclair is a very famous American outlaw. He was in all kinds of trouble back in the 60s. He was the manager of a very famous rock band from Detroit called the Motor City 5 or the MC5. He got in a lot of trouble for his use of the cannabis. Where he lives in Detroit, or where he is from, Detroit. Now he's lived over in Europe. He's lived in New Orleans, Louisiana. I think when this book came out, he was calling New Orleans home. It wasn't legal, but it is now. It's not yet legal here in Tennessee, though. The hemp is legal now everywhere. The CBD is legal, but he was a prisoner, a cannabis prisoner of conscience in Detroit. That famously, John Lennon from the Beatles, maybe you all have heard of the Beatles, they wrote a song for him called Free John Sinclair. Him and Yoko Ono, around the time he did 10 years for 2 joints. He didn't actually serve the 10 years. They had a freedom rally for him, and they got him out of the joint much more quickly. But he is a poet of the blues and deeply, deeply influential to me. Now, if you are from the South, or if you like this topic very much, you can do as I have done, and I've gone on multiple pilgrimages. There are many civil rights pilgrimages you can take here in the South, to Birmingham, Montgomery, Atlanta, and Memphis. But there are music pilgrimages. You can go to Muscle Shoals, Alabama. You can go to the Stax Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, and you can go to some of the blues museums in Mississippi. And there's a whole blues trail all through the Delta. I've only recently started really exploring that part of Mississippi, and some of the poverty that you learned about maybe in your history books of descendants of the African-American slaves who are still live in poverty in Mississippi. There's still Black rural poverty in Mississippi today. Go down to the Delta, go down to Clarksdale, Mississippi, where the blues was born. This poem is going to tell you the history of the blues in one poem from his book, Fattening Frogs. Fattening Frogs for Snakes, the Delta Sound Suite by John Sinclair. My copy of this wonderful book is autographed to me, and I'm going to read you this poem now called The Delta Sound. And I'm going to read it kind of in, not nearly as well as John, but in my best John Sinclair. The Delta Sound. Ain't too many left that plays them real deep blues. Ain't too many more left. Ain't too many left that sings the type of blues that I sing. Muddy Waters to Robert Palmer. From the lobby of the Peabody Motel in Memphis, where the Delta begins, down Highway 61 through Tunica into Clarksdale, Mississippi. This is where the music was born and bred, in miles and miles of cotton fields, one-room shacks, dirt roads stretching across the countryside, standing at the crossroads where 49 meets 61, or waiting in the dark for the train to make it down the track and jump on board, because anywhere else is better than this place. This is where the music came to be. Boogie lightning against the sky. Tommy Johnson and Charlie Patton making their pacts with the devil at the stroke of midnight. Legba at the crossroads of America and Africa. Black men and women dragged in chains and shipped in chains and whipped into Mississippi, where the music came to life under the whip. and the gun and hours of relentless sun beating down every day on the slave peoples, cutting trees, pulling stumps like mules, plowing cleared land, planting, picking cotton dawn to dark, the music deep inside them coming out in grunts and groans, and the moans of the spirits of the ancestors in the train whistle, in the air everywhere, the land soaked with their blood, the night alive with the spirit voices wailing over the crops, the fruits of their labors, the richness of the land, and constant mockery. Everything they made was taken away. Everything was stolen from them, but the music made life go on and moved peoples to stay alive and led them out of the Delta to Chicago, to Detroit, but some big city, some other place where no cotton grows and the crackers wear suits and carry lunch pails and the plants pay that good money. And the music gets louder and louder and lightning, electricity leaping from the walls, the Delta sound brought to bear on the city deeper than deep from where the feeling rises. The Delta sound. Ain't too many left. Ain't too many more left. Ain't too many left. And all that pays that deep blues. The Delta Sound by John Sinclair, poet. From my home up in the Motor City of Detroit, Michigan. Home here is Tennessee. I got multiple places. My home is wherever I park the bicycle or lay my hat, wherever I hang my coat, wherever I pitch my tent, wherever I roll out my sleeping bag. That's where home is for me. Down in the South, there was an old work farm that later became a prison. This is very common now for us to learn about how the enslaved populations, many went into the work farm populations, later in to the prison population. And we can now trace how slavery is illegal everywhere except in the prison in the United States. And we have the largest incarcerated population in the world is here in the United States, and compared to the general population out in civilian population, a disproportionate number of African Americans are in the prison population. And so that blues still comes from the experiences, and also some of the harder jobs that have come out. I met a man here at Tennessee Tech, a Black student from Mississippi who plays football for the Golden Eagles. And he had actually, his family had actually gotten land during the early days of Reconstruction. There was a great effort to provide some means out of that tragedy into freedom, into autonomy, into integrity and authenticity of hard work and participation. As you know, through the civil rights movement, there was many great struggles for voting rights, for desegregation. Many of these struggles are still ongoing. But this young person, his family got land in Reconstruction and became farmers, and he is from the very land that his grandparents and great-grandparents inherited at emancipation. It's a great story that he was able to share of that. So he grew up farming the land in Mississippi. I don't know if this professor is still working at Vanderbilt or if he is retired or where he is today, but he's an English professor who's really obsessed with the blues. And we don't have a blues studies program. And you might find over in the music department, in music appreciation, some of your faculty will talk to you about the blues if you get to take a music appreciation class or the gospel. But many literary scholars, because there's a great poetry in the blues gets kind of outsourced over to the English department. The English department can be kind of a dropping ground for all cultural modes of production that are artistic, that are hybrid forms. So it's not just literary works like poetry, but lyrics are cousin to poetry, and then you add the music and it becomes its own art form. And I see them as their own art form unto themselves. But I think that that this is a fantastic definition of the blues. Keeping in mind in classroom iterations of this previously, where I had a really good sound system, we'd just listen to a lot of good tunes. I provided for you all the playlist at the top of the class. So you can listen to that onto your own. And I've got YouTube I'm going to drop for you guys at the end of today's lecture. But I do miss the classroom version of this where we just kick out the jams. But it would take a lot of time, and I would maybe be able to get all the lecture in as well. But this definition, the blues are a synthesis combining work songs, group seculars, field hollers, sacred harmonies, proverbial wisdom, folk philosophy, political commentary, ribald humor, elegiac lament, and much more. They constitute an amalgam. That's a mixture. That's a gumbo. That's a collage. That's a mixed up and messed up thing here where you blend a lot of stuff together to make something new that seems to have always been in motion in America. This is a profoundly American art form, always becoming, transforming, displacing the peculiar experiences of Africans in the New World. Leroy Jones, who later went as Amiri Baraka, who we'll encounter in the Beat movement later on in this semester, in his book, The Blues People, said that Black music is always radical in the context of American culture. Baraka is going to be one of the scholars that says, no, you can't fuse blues and the gospel, as I have with Pastor Moss and Professor Cohn, I'll introduce in a second, who see these as contingently related liberation narratives. He does not buy into that. He sees the blues as a liberation narrative and the gospel as a tool of the white man, basically, and basically implies that African Americans who adopted Christianity on the plantation and then later in the Black church had sort of taken on, quote, the white man's God. Can't get into it today, but there's a lot of contentious debate out there whether that God is white or not. That's a big question. There's a great song, praise and worship band, that's not doing that anymore because the lead singer left the faith. But they had a song, "God Is Not a White Man," came out a couple of years ago. That's an interesting topic for another day. Though I've at least tipped you guys off to that topic. The ethnicity of Jesus is hotly discussed and debated. Professor Cohn says the blues are a lived experience and encounter with the contradictions of American society, but refusal to be conquered by it. So there's this kind of like, I'm down, but I'm fighting back aspect to it. The hope provides the strength to survive and also an openness to the integrity of life's pains without being destroyed by them. And Cohn is one, like Moss, who works within the Christian tradition and has a friendliness to blues. Dr. Cornel West says that the blues represents the Black American interpretation of tragic comic hope in the face of dehumanizing hate and oppression. And this is a great word here, tragic comic. This is the blending of tragedy and joy, of pain and pleasure, of it's good and it's bad and then it's good again. We're living through a tragic comic time period in American history right now. You all, all your parents, back in the day, when your uncle so-and-so served in Vietnam, or grandpa so-and-so served in World War II, blah, 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 back in the day. Y'all are going to have so many back in the day stories for your children and your grandchildren, if you choose to have children and grandchildren, because what y'all are going through right now ain't nothing like it. This pandemic and the social injustice and the social justice struggles of your time period, whether you're talking about the murder of George Floyd last year and the protests that came after it, or the events of January 6, 2021, or the contested election of November 2020, or the COVID pandemic, or the Delta variant surge that we're going through right now, the mask debate, the vaccine debate. You don't even have to just, all the extreme weather and global climate change. Y'all are living through a profound period in American history right now, where these topics are not antique like they maybe have been. Maybe there were other periods in this course where the students felt very much that this topic was in the past, that don't have nothing to do with me. I don't know what you're talking about, teacher. These topics of struggle are very much in your lives today. The tragic comic maintains the ability to laugh and retain a sense of life's joy to preserve hope even while staring in the face of hate and hypocrisy. As a hip-hop professor, West asserts that tragicomic hope expresses itself most profoundly in the wrenchingly honest yet compassionate voices of the Black freedom struggle, most poignantly in the painful eloquence of the blues, and most exuberantly in the improvisational virtuosity of jazz. I love jazz music, but it's above my pay grade. It's instrumental, it's improvisational. We will talk about jazz when we talk about the beat movement in a few weeks, but just keeping in mind that it's a really hard thing to understand, and it's musicologically sophisticated. Also, it doesn't generally always have lyrics. And the poetry inroad into pop music as a literary art form that I have claimed as a teacher of this is through the words, and the musical form of jazz doesn't have words, but it's a powerful form. So it's adjacent to blues, gospel, hip hop, rock and roll, country, and the other stuff we'll be talking about this semester. And so, are blues and gospel working in harmony, or are they opposites? I've done a binary here. Now, a binary, that's a fancy English department word you can write down in your notebook, is an opposite, and they exist on sides, but at the same time they can work together. And so it's up to you to determine your own philosophy after you've spent some time with the music and this topic, and you've got, you're not going to be required to produce an answer for me, but I'm just trying to, in this lecture, show you how there's two sides to this, but you can see the gospel and the blues working as opposites on the slide here: revolt versus submission, the African inheritance of indigenous African religion and musical forms versus European Western forms that were perhaps from the slave master and like that. Rebellion versus redemption. In Christian teaching, the rebellion is not necessarily always the good way to go. Redemption does involve some acknowledgement of human failure, of human inadequacy, of human incompleteness. These kind of rubrics will play out in the rubric of redemption. Again, my favorite is to talk about the dynamic between Saturday night and Sunday morning. The devil is a tempter in the New Testament. The devil character shows up in Christian art in lots of different places. There's a lot of debate about today among more sophisticated theologians, really about and religious studies scholars, as to whether or not what this devil character actually is. But clearly, Jesus is tempted by the devil and chooses not to go for those temptations in his desert experience. And then there's the whole spirit versus flesh dichotomy. This is very much seen in Paul, and in a lot of the teaching here in the Bible Belt, you're going to encounter this high regard for this dichotomy between spirit and the flesh. But hey, it's an embodied religion, right? God takes on flesh in the Christian tradition, unlike other traditions. It's a very interesting dynamic. And talking about the flesh, women blues singers, there's been some great stuff nowadays. There's so many great movies out there about Bessie Smith and Nina Simone and Aretha Franklin, and so many of Diana Ross. You can learn so much now about the feminine icons of the blues tradition. That it's not just a guys club. And a feminist scholar, Angela Davis, will teach us about the importance of talking about sexuality and women's sexuality. And so in the blues, you're going to find that there's a lot of puns and a lot of innuendo. And people talk about, hip hop as though it were this recent invention, and hip hop that deals with, sexually explicit, references is, demeaning and all this. Yes, that's true. You can find male authored hip hop that maybe is part of toxic masculinity, that's maybe part of rape culture, and we should criticize it. But you're also going to find radical sexual expressions by female blues artists. There's a really famous hip hop song that came out in the last year or so. There's gay hip hop, that's come out, or gay pop. You all know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go all into the details of that, as not to embarrass myself or to embarrass anybody on the call, but look that stuff up. But they're going to see that for the female blues artist, this was an expression of her freedom. And you're going to see this in women in hip hop as well, that they're expressing their power and their freedom through being sexually autonomous. And you're going to find, basically, they're going to say to the dudes, don't have a double standard. Not only men can talk about, certain, body parts and such. Again, I'll move on from that. Reference that one particular song. It's got, and even has an acronym. You all can look it up. You guys probably listened to it when it came out, and you guys probably had your own conversations in your own friend group, whether or not that was appropriate or inappropriate, whether you like that or you don't like that. And I'm not here to judge you either way. If you like it or you don't like it, that's up to you. No, this is try to be a safe space and a no judgment zone. And you can disagree with these artists if you want to. We're not here to judge them. A lot of them are dead. Some of them aren't dead, but we're not here to be their, to determine their fate. Yeah, I said that about Cheryl Strayed, who you're reading for next week. A couple of years ago, I had a student write a vicious article, basically calling her every word in the book, and she's established an important author that I thought was an important enough author to put on the syllabus. And this lady, female student, just trashed her. So it was vicious. We're not here to do that. We're not here to say, if they're moral or immoral or whatever. We'll talk about that on Monday and next Wednesday when we get to Cheryl Strayed. Paul Guerin in his book says that religion has, for him, as he sees it related to the blues, has been an agent of repression, attempting to crush the spirit of revolt, replacing it with the doctrine of accommodation. And that's that tension in the blues, right? Is the blues completely against the church? And what you're going to find out is with a lot of the popular African-American musical artists is that they came up in church, and then they could play the blues club or the dinner club or the juke joint on Saturday, and they can also sing in the choir on Sunday. And so this Saturday night, Sunday morning thing isn't for them some, fanciful debate topic. That's a real topic for them because their careers and their livelihoods depended on them being both. And so I'm with Pastor Moss and James Cone that blues and gospel can work together in harmony, and that they don't have to be opposites. And so here's a quote from Pastor Moss from a speech he gave, a sermon he gave 10 years ago that I actually got to hear, which is such an honor. Got to hear Pastor Moss. Somewhere I've got the audio recording of the whole sermon. He said, blues and gospel are the same thing. When you have your blues in the words of B.B. King, you say, my thrill is gone. But if you want to switch it to gospel, don't change the chords, just change the lyrics. To precious Lord, take my hand. It is the same thing. You're just shifting the lyrics. The blues deal with your existential situation. The gospel deals with your eschatological situation. The existential means what you are dealing with right now, and the eschatological means what God is going to do in the future. So I encourage you all to listen to the songs on that playlist that I made for you and get in your mind, what is it and how do you find yourself in it? And then to go out and listen to some of these cats, to go out and listen to Robert Johnson, one of the original blues people who we are so, we're so indebted to Robert Johnson for his contribution. And you'll find a track on there on the playlist I provided for you. I think each of these artists should have a track, but he's the one who allegedly sold his soul to the devil. He's allegedly the start of what's called the 27 Club, which is people that died at the age of 27. Sam Cooke, the track we have on there from the Soul Stirrers is I believe I got the Jesus Gave Me Water version there. He's somebody who doesn't have the kind of ruggedness of some of the early blues records, and he's got this very polished, popped singing voice, and just powerful, artful music. And there you have the crossover from gospel, not to hip hop, but what became known as soul music, what became known as Motown music, and what became known as basically pop music in the 60s. There's a great movie on Netflix about Sam Cooke. There's so much has been done with these people. Mavis Staples is still working. Many of the Staples singers, like Pop Staples, have gone on, but they were like the soundtrack to all the freedom marches through the 60s. Their song Freedom Highway is a great example of a song that was on the radio. It was a gospel song. It was a blues song. It was a rock and roll song. It was all of the above, and it was blended together to articulate the freedom struggle. Curtis Mayfield, People Get Ready, one of the most covered songs by great rock artists, comes out of the blues tradition. And again, by the 60s, you're going to see with a lot of these artists, all of these things are coming together: blues, gospel, rock, soul, funk, what becomes hip hop. It's all there in one form. Nina Simone's a great example. She was a bit of a tragic figure, and I strongly encourage you to watch the documentary that's out there about her. A matter of fact, I could give you guys so much homework just on this one topic. It's up to you whether or not you will choose to go and explore some of this on your own. But there's so many great movies out there on Amazon Prime and Netflix that will further your education on this. And there's lots of listening. My playlist is just a tip, and you can go into the portal that is your Spotify, your YouTube, your Apple Music, whatever music you, however you get your music online, and you can just go start exploring this on your own. I should have had a picture. I thought I had a picture of Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Maybe she's going to come up in here, but don't forget Sister Rosetta Tharpe, because she's the one who actually, she formally did gospel blues together, and it became rock and roll. And I wish we were in the classroom. I'd play the video for you. And she just shreds. I mean, she shreds her guitar. She's like the Jimi Hendrix before there was a Jimi Hendrix. Check out Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And then this form then births poetry. Spoken word poetry in the 60s had predecessors in Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets, and then it becomes rap in the 70s. I was there at my elementary school. I lived in Cleveland at the time, and I was at a predominantly Black elementary school. And I was there when rap was born, and it was I get chill bumps just thinking about it. My kid, they were bringing in the little 7-inches, and I was there when the Sugar Hill Gang song "Rapper's Delight" dropped, and that was one of the first rap songs. And we played it in the lunchroom on this one of those little suitcase record players. Oh my gosh! And they would let us turn out the lights in the lunchroom when Parliament Funkadelic dropped that song "Flashlight." The kids, I was like 10 years old. We brought the flashlights to school, and we would dance in the lunchroom. Anyway, Dr. Dyson just came on at Vanderbilt Divinity School, where I'm a graduate of. Maybe I can get him to come on our class one of these, come to Tech one of these days. He's very expensive. I probably can't afford Dr. Dyson. Rap is a form of profound musical, cultural, and social creativity. Rap artists explore grammatical creativity, verbal wizardry, and linguistic innovation. Maybe I will, as an alumnus, get the alumnus discount and sign up for his class. I referenced Gil Scott-Heron and the Last Poets as a Black spoken word that were predecessors to rap in the late 60s and early 70s. And I'm going to ask you, for the remainder of your time that you normally would have been listening to me lecture, to on your own right now go and listen to Otis Moss III, OM3, with this excerpt from his sermon about Tupac Shakur. And he basically brings Tupac Shakur into a Palm Sunday sermon. Palm Sunday is the Sunday before Good Friday, when we remember the crucifixion of Christ in church. This will blow your mind. You might not like it. It might be like nothing you've ever heard. But I promise you, this is going to blow your mind. And I'm going to drop the link into the chat right now. And I beg of you, please, right now, before you do anything else, go and listen to this sermon of hip hop preaching thug theology. You don't even know what I'm talking about. You will after you listen to this. Please hit me up over email if you need anything. I'm going to be out of pocket all weekend talking about music. I'm going to hear some music this weekend. I'm going to be completely out of pocket. I'll be back Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. We'll be discussing Cheryl Strayed and the book Wild. Continue reading Into the Wild if you haven't finished it. And if you finished Into the Wild, start Wild immediately. And I will see you all on Monday at 9 o'clock. Thank you all so much for coming to class. And how do I stop recording? I got to find the right button. Thank you all so much.